Now this case was a standard workers' comp case, nothing special about it. This was the second round of surveillance on this guy I did. The first round I had a few months prior. I did get video of him. He would go out his back door several times during the day, sit down, smoke, get up and go back in. This go around, the client had requested that I work at 2 days. The first day on a Monday because the claimant had a medical appointment and they wanted to see how he presented before and after that medical appointment. His residence was sort of close to my office, and I did find myself in the general area from time to time, so it just made sense for me to do some pre-surveillance intel drive-bys. Now, I did a drive-by Thursday evening after I got off of another case. I was able to grab a little video of him and his wife and another male subject as they smoked a cigarette outside. I knew he was still there, and I knew he pretty much had the same activities. So I assume this will be an easy case. There are a ton of good parking places where I can watch where he sits and he smokes, and I can see his vehicles from that point as well. Friday morning rolls around. I head out early on another case about 5 a.m. I do a quick drive-by and all is quiet. No lights, no activity. All of the vehicles are present and accounted for. Another good sign for me. I then went about my business and covered my other case. Now, some of you may be asking, do you get paid for this extra work? The simple answer is no. But whenever I can, I always like to do some in-field intel work prior to my case, like simple drive-bys, so I get a realistic view of the layout of the land, and I get some info on vehicles, like the colors and where they're parked and license plate numbers of vehicles that I'm not aware of. This type of going above and beyond has proven to be a great way for me to maintain great relationships with my vendors, get continued work from them, and become their go-to guy for these types of cases. This video is sponsored by OREP Insurance and Working PI Magazine. OREP is a leading provider of private investigator liability insurance. Visit orep.org for a quote today. Now, my Friday case was a bust. 6 hours in, no activity, no sign of my subject. Client tells me I can go home early. I'm like, no problem. It's Friday. I have plenty of things to do. As I was driving back to the office, it was about 3 in the afternoon. I decide to go by and check things out at this other case. When I get there, I don't see anybody out back, and I notice one of the vehicles is gone, his pickup. So I decided to go around the block and see if it was parked out front on the street. I'm thinking, well, if the pickup is out front, this makes things more interesting because I can't watch the front and the back of the residence at the same time. Now I pull around the corner and lo and behold, there is the subject's pickup parked in the street. There's also several guys standing there in the front yard, one of them being my subject. The pickup also has a U-Haul trailer attached to it, and it's backed up to the front door of the house. Now I'm like, no way, are you serious? Now he lived there with his wife and a couple of his adult children, so I figured one of the kids is probably moving out. I roll down to the end of the block, I find a nice shade tree to park under, and I start shooting some video. Now I got a ton of video as he and the other guys were loading up all kinds of boxes and bags of stuff into that trailer. I would say maybe an hour of video of my subject. This is good stuff. You can tell when he has a heavy box. You can even tell he probably has some back problems and his back is probably bothering him, but he just keeps on working, loading up that trailer. Now after a bit, I see them bring out the last few boxes and they close up the doors on the trailer. Then he hops in the front seat of the pickup. I'm like, here we go, road trip. He puts it in the gear, he pulls it out on the street, and then he parks it on the street and gets out and goes back to the house and continues drinking some beers with his buddies in the front yard. A few minutes later, I see him as he gets a call on his cell phone. He looks down the street and then he looks back at his buddies. He says something. They all stare down the street. Then here it comes. Coming around the corner is one of those huge U-Haul trucks. It pulls up. Driver gets out. They all chat. They have a good time for a second or two. And then he gets back in the truck and he backs that truck right up to the front door of that house. For the next 4 hours, I watch and get video as my subject works his tail off loading that truck with boxes, bags, and yes, furniture and even appliances. He was definitely the one in charge, and he was happy to show all those young guys how to handle the big stuff. Man, will the client ever be happy with this. Money shot after money shot after money shot. Now, they get done about 8 o'clock that night, and man, I am beat. At this point, I have been in my car since 5 a.m. I stick around, though. I don't know if they're moving that night or if they're going to be doing it the next day. After about another hour, them sitting out there having a few beers and talking, some of the guys get into a car that's parked on the street street and they leave the neighborhood. Then my subject and the guy that was driving the big U-Haul went inside. About 10 o'clock, I see most of the lights are turned off in the residence, and I decide they are done for the night and I can finally call it a day after 17 hours in my car. Now, I know from previous surveillance my subject is an early riser. I have seen him out smoking before 6 o'clock in the morning. So I get home, I get cleaned up, I send the client a quick update, and I let them know I'm going back out in the morning. I then try to get some sleep, but it was hard. Man, I was pumped. I had a million thoughts in my head. Now, I'm back up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm out the door about 4:30, and I am back on scene before 5. When I get there, I see lights on inside, and both the U-Haul truck and the trailer are still there. I then get set up in front for surveillance. A little before 6, my subject and the guy that drove the big U-Haul truck come out of the front and sit on the porch smoking cigarettes. A short time after this, here comes that car from the previous night, but with just one guy in it. He has a smoke with them, and then my subject jumps in his pickup with the trailer attached. His wife comes out and gets in with him in the pickup, and the other two get into the big truck, and away we go. We drive for what seemed like eternity. It was one of the slowest follows I have ever had. They just went across town, but it took almost 30 minutes to drive what should have taken about 10 or 15 minutes. I was thinking they may have something loose in the back of that truck. They stopped a couple of times, and they opened up the doors, and they checked things out back there, so there's probably some stuff jostling around. That was probably why they were driving so slow. We finally get to our destination. They pull the big truck around into the alley to the back of a house, and then he puts the pickup on a side street with the trailer attached. Now it's starting to get a little hairy. There's no place for me to park and see the rear of this house except in the alley, and if I park in that alley and I try to get some video, I'm going to stick out like a sore thumb. I kept driving around the block slowly, looking and looking. Then I found it, a spot where I could park on an adjacent street, and I had a little sliver of a view between a fence and a house where I was able to sit there for the next 3 hours and get video as they unloaded the truck and the trailer into that house. It was amazing how much video I got. After they got it all unloaded, I never saw them except a few times when he would come out and have a cigarette. My client contacts me, says, "Great job, thanks so much," and asks me to work it Sunday again, as well still cover the medical on Monday, and I'm like, no problem. Extra days, extra hours, I love it. I go back out Sunday morning to the new address, and the U-Haul truck and trailer and his pickup were gone. I then went back to the original address, and his pickup was there with the U-Haul trailer. I got more video that day of him and his wife loading that trailer several times and unloading that trailer several times. Mid-afternoon, he took the trailer back to the U-Haul rental place and went to the new house for the rest of the day. Monday rolls around. He was up like clockwork, smoking out back. About 9 o'clock in the morning, he comes out of the residence with his wife. They get into a car. She's the driver this time. They go to the medical clinic where he has a scheduled appointment. And then, when he got out of the car, I couldn't believe it. He walked right into that clinic, hunched over, using a cane like he could hardly walk. I couldn't believe it. He then comes out about an hour later, still using his cane. They get in the car. They go back to the house. But when they get back to his new house, guess what? No cane. He just walks right in, happy as can be. I continue to get video throughout the day as he walks out and has his cigarettes about every hour. This was a picture-perfect case for me. Lots of activity, lots of video, nailed it, and the client couldn't have been happier. I also worked that same case 6 more days after that. Had I just gone out on Monday, I may not have even known where he lived.